Good afternoon. Today I'm going to speak to you about taxes. If you listen, I promise I'll make it interesting and you'll be happy that you did. So have you ever taken a look at your paycheck and thought about how great it would be if you could keep your entire paycheck every pay period without having taxes withheld? Or have you ever wondered why the government even takes sometimes nearly 1/3 of your paycheck before it ever even hits your bank account? Do you loathe the thought of filing mountains of tax forms, keeping receipts all year, and spending large amounts of money and time to prepare your tax return every year? But did you know that through comprehensive tax reform called the FairTax, that you could not only potentially keep 100% of your paycheck, every paycheck, but you would also receive what's called a prebate check deposited automatically into your bank account every month? Now, does this sound interesting to you? Well, my friends, let me tell you a little bit more about the FairTax and why it's important to implement this simple and fair system of taxation. But first, I'd like to share a little bit of history with you about our current tax system and the process of withholding from our paychecks so you can have a better understanding of how our current system works. According to an article posted on the Tax Foundation website, in 1913, the 16th Amendment to the Constitution made the income tax a permanent fixture in the U.S. tax system. This amendment gave the Congress legal authority to tax income and resulted in a revenue law that taxed incomes of both individuals and corporations. Additionally, the withholding portion of the tax on wages was introduced in 1943, and this was instrumental in increasing the number of taxpayers to 60 million people and tax collections to $43 billion by 1945. And what this information means is that until 1943, Americans were required to pay income tax, but they were on a pay-as-you-go system. As they earned their income, they were required to then calculate and submit a payment every month to the government for the amount of taxes due. The government was in need of revenue to support the war effort, and the pay-as-you-go system was inefficient for their needs, so they implemented the automatic employer withholding program that we know today. The end result was that employees eventually started to pay less and less attention to the amount of money that was automatically being withheld from their paychecks. The bureaucrats in Washington had stumbled onto a gold mine. They found that Americans didn't really pay attention to the money that was taken from their paychecks each pay period. They could easily raise taxes and hardly anyone would take notice. This became a free-for-all and our out-of-control spending problem began. I personally believe that our current national debt of $17 trillion is a direct result of our politicians' misconceptions that they can have free access to our paychecks and can tax us to death to pay for their overspending problem. So back to the fair tax and how this could completely change our country and remove the power from Washington and put it back in the hands of the people. The fair tax seeks to eliminate all income tax, property tax, and investment dividend tax, and replace it with a simple 23% consumption tax at the retail sales level. Currently, everything that we buy at the retail sales level has approximately 23% tax already built into the product. This means that when a company produces an item, there is a tax that is paid at all levels and is passed on each time that each item is moved. When the manufacturer sells an item, they pay tax on the revenue, and they pass it along to the wholesaler. The wholesaler pays tax and passes it along to the retailer. The retailer pays tax and passes it along to the consumer. By the time that the consumer purchases the item from the retailer, about 23% of the purchase price is the embedded tax that has been passed along at each level of the process. The fair tax will abolish this tax at the corporate level. This means that there will instantly be a 23% savings in manufacturing of all goods and services through the free market competition. Prices will drop by 23%. However, the retailer will then collect 23% sales tax at the register when the item is purchased. This means that if you buy an item under our current tax system for $1, it already has manufacturing taxes built into the price of the item that equate to about 23%. Under the fair tax, those embedded taxes would simply be removed and replaced with a sales tax of 23%, and the item would still cost $1. Well, that's the mechanics of how the fair tax works. But now let's dig into the really good stuff. You may be thinking you don't trust that all items would cost the same under the fair tax because of the 23% tax. A simple way to look at this is think about what happens at two gas stations that are located side by side. You ever notice that when one gas station raises or lowers their prices, the adjacent gas station also raises and lowers its prices to beat or match its competitor? This is the natural effect of the free market. There is a certain acceptable profit margin built into all goods and services in a capitalist free market. If the prices are too high, consumers simply go elsewhere. This is why prices of retail goods will remain the same under the fair tax as they are today. Additionally, the great news is that you will no longer have any taxes withheld from your paycheck. If you earn $1,000 a week, you will simply keep every penny of it. No longer will you have federal or state taxes withheld. The fair tax will also fund Social Security, so you will not have FICA taxes withheld from your paycheck. You earned it, you keep it. You decide when and how you pay your taxes. If you do not want to pay taxes, simply purchase used items. If you want to purchase a new car, then 23% of that purchase price will fund the federal government. Some other great news about the fair tax. Each household will receive what's called a prebate check automatically deposited into their bank account each month. This prebate check will vary in amount based on the number of people in the household and is used to cover the taxes on the basic necessities of life, such as food and groceries. According to the FairTax.org, a single person would receive $224 every month, and a family of 4 would receive $759 automatically every single month. You may be asking yourself, will people try to avoid paying taxes by only buying used products? Guess what? People are already avoiding paying taxes. They are called tax cheats, drug dealers, and criminals. Under the current system, a drug dealer does not pay any income tax, right? That's definitely not fair. Under the fair tax, that same drug dealer now pays exactly what you pay, 23% on every new item that he or she purchases. When that drug dealer purchases a new $100,000 car, he just paid $23,000 in taxes. That is great news. Additionally, when a European family visits Disney World for a vacation, or a Chinese businesswoman visits the United States to grow her company, they too now contribute 23% of every dollar that they spend to our federal tax system. Remember, this means that their dollars are now going to fund your Social Security and to pave our highways. The entire world would see the United States as an economic safe haven for huge corporations to grow and flourish. The fair tax eliminates corporate taxes, which in turn would generate massive amounts of job growth. If companies no longer have overbearing tax burdens, they will be able to grow and expand their operations. Every corporation in the world would consider opening offices in the United States. This would bring long sought-after jobs back to our shores, and our economy would grow by leaps and bounds. You must be thinking, well, the fair tax sounds too good to be true. Well, it gets even better. How about never having to file a tax return, ever? Under the fair tax, April 15th, tax day, simply becomes another tax day. According to an article by Nicholas Graham at the Huffington Post, Americans already spend $140 billion and over 7.6 billion hours a year just to file their taxes. All that time and money will now be recovered and saved under the fair tax. So why haven't you heard much about the fair tax? That's because the power-hungry politicians in Washington hate it. They are terrified of losing their power. Both Republicans and Democrats need the American people to be afraid. They need us to be divided into parties and then fight for each side. Imagine a political campaign strategy without such quotes by George Bush as, "Read my lips, no new taxes." Our tax dollars would no longer be a tool for the federal government to use or to try to scam votes out of an all-out power grab. If everyone paid the same rate based on what they spend and consume, there would be no room for debate about raising or lowering taxes. I believe that it's time that we stop this madness by simplifying our current 73,000-page tax code with something that is fair and takes the power out of the hands of the bureaucrats in Washington and gives it back to the people of this great nation. I understand that I've given you a lot of new and exciting information, so I'd like to recap a few key points about how the fair tax is the right choice for comprehensive tax reform in America. First of all, under the fair tax, you will not only keep your entire paycheck every pay period, you will also receive a prebate check every month to cover the taxes for the basic necessities of life. Consider this an instant pay raise. All income, Social Security, and property taxes are eliminated, as are capital gains taxes. Social Security will now be funded and finally secured by the FairTax. Anyone who purchases new items at the retail sales level now contributes to these programs. Americans currently spend 7.6 billion hours and $140 billion to prepare their taxes by April 15th. April 15th will just become another day and you will never have to file a tax return again. The FairTax is a consumption tax based on the form of 23% sales tax at the retail sales level. It's important to remember that the price of goods already have an embedded 23% cost of manufacturing that will be eliminated and replaced by the FairTax 23% sales tax. Through free market competition, prices will drop by 23%, but then include the 23% sales tax. This means that if something costs $1 today, it will still be $1 under the FairTax. Everyone pays with the implementation of the FairTax. The drug dealer with a new sports car, the family visiting from overseas to tour the United States, and even illegal immigrants who work for cash will now contribute to the tax system. They all use our roads, schools, and hospitals. Isn't it time that they contribute? Under the FairTax, our economy will flourish. Millions of jobs will be created on U.S. soil by foreign companies who will no longer have to pay corporate taxes. The ultimate benefit to the FairTax is that it will give the power of this great nation back to the people where it belongs. Politicians will no longer be able to hold us hostage and bind us with their threats. It's our money, our country, and they work for us. Do not let them maintain this control over us any longer. They have divided this country among the rich and the poor by creating class warfare. We should not tolerate it any longer. Let's take back America and stand strong against these tax and spend bureaucrats. Write your congressman and tell them to seek legislation that demands comprehensive tax reform in the form of the FairTax. For more information, please visit www.fairtax.org.